What happens when the future King of England sits down expecting a routine diplomatic interview, only to be blindsided by the most intense grilling of his life? What follows will challenge everything you thought you knew about royal composure, and how far even the most polished public figure can be pushed. Before we unpack this explosive moment, be sure to subscribe and drop a comment sharing what you think really pushes someone to their breaking point. Under the harsh glare of studio lights, the familiar set cast bold shadows across Bill Maher's face as he skimmed his notes one last time. Tonight's guest wasn't a typical actor or political figure. This was Prince William, the heir to the British throne, making a rare appearance on U.S. late-night TV. The booking had been months in the making, with palace staff demanding strict topic approvals and a firm list of off-limits questions. Maher glanced at that list, a sly smile tugging at his lips. After over 2 decades in the chair, he knew the best interviews happened outside the lines, and tonight, he had no plans to play it safe. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome His Royal Highness Prince William, Maher announced with a voice that mixed formality and subtle irreverence, just as his audience had come to expect. William walked on stage with the polished ease of a man raised under constant public scrutiny. His navy suit fit perfectly. His smile was warm but reserved, every move crafted to present the image of a modern royal at ease anywhere. He took his seat with the poise of someone who had done this countless times. "Your Royal Highness, thank you for being here," Maher began, sounding more formal than usual. "When my team told me we'd secured this interview, I honestly thought they were joking." William laughed, a sincere sound that had won over presidents and everyday people alike. "Well, Bill, I figured it was time to break out of the usual media loop. Your show has quite the name for, let's say, uncensored discussion." "Uncensored? Yeah, that's a word for it," Maher said with a smirk, leaning back. "Speaking of which, let's talk about your recent remarks on U.S. foreign policy. You said that the special relationship between our nations depends on, and I quote, honest dialogue between friends." The prince nodded smoothly, his media instincts taking over. "That's right. The UK and the US have stayed strong through tough times precisely because we can speak openly, even when we disagree on global matters." "Open dialogue," Maher repeated, his tone sharpening just slightly. "So let's be open. You talk a lot about service and duty, but have you ever noticed how that duty never seems to include questioning or stepping away from the institution that gives you your platform?" For a split second, William's polished smile faltered, so briefly most viewers wouldn't notice. But Maher did, and his focus tightened. "I'm not sure I understand what you mean, Bill," William replied. "Oh, I think you do," Maher said, his voice still casual but now edged with something more pointed. "Your entire image is built around being a public servant. But how can you be one when you're part of a system that exists above the people?" Prince William, the reluctant royal, a man who'd rather be in a helicopter saving lives than waving from a palace balcony? It's a compelling image, modern, grounded, almost heroic. But here's what doesn't quite add up. If he truly believes in putting service before self, if he's genuinely pushing for a more democratic, updated monarchy, then why isn't he leading the charge himself? The studio audience, who had been cheerfully engaged moments earlier, began to sense a change in the air. The mood shifted. There was tension now, a charged anticipation, the kind that signals something unexpected is about to unfold. William adjusted in his seat, visibly caught between his polished media training and a rising irritation he was struggling to suppress. "The monarchy has changed a lot in the last 100 years, Bill," William said, trying to stay composed. "We've become more open, more approachable, and more engaged with the real issues people face." Maher raised his eyebrows. "Have you, though?" he said, cutting in, his signature impatience now unmistakable. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've just mastered public relations. You say the right things, dress the right way, back all the right causes. But in the end, you're still someone who believes he should lead a nation because of who his grandmother happened to be." The words dropped between them like a live wire. William's jaw clenched, the tension showing ever so slightly. For the first time since stepping into the spotlight that day, the mask slipped, just a bit. That's a rather reductive take on a very complex institution, William replied, voice even but edged with steel. The monarchy has served Britain for over 1,000 years. Maher leaned forward, sensing the moment. 1,000 years? Sure. But how much of that was built on telling people that God personally picked your family to rule? How many generations believe they were born to serve you, just because they were told so from the cradle? Divine right hasn't been serious law for centuries. William's reply came quickly, but the strain was beginning to show. Today, the monarchy exists with the consent of Parliament and, ultimately, the people. Does it really? Maher pressed, voice rising, energized by the unraveling tension in his guest. Because I don't recall anyone asking the public if your father should be king. No one voted on whether you should inherit the throne either. Sounds to me like that consent you're talking about is more of an assumption, just another privilege handed down without question. William's fingers, once resting calmly, now gripped the armrests. The cameras didn't miss a thing. Every shift in posture, every flicker of emotion, every small crack in the image of the ever-composed prince. The public has had many chances to weigh in through democratic channels, William said, voice taut with restraint. And the polls consistently show support for the monarchy. Maher scoffed, brushing the comment aside with a wave. Polls? Polls used to show support for slavery, too. For denying women the right to vote. For all kinds of injustices we now condemn. Popular support doesn't automatically make something right, Your Highness. Sometimes people just haven't been asked the right questions. That final phrase, Your Highness, landed with a sharp edge, just mocking enough to sting. William's cool, a product of years of training and public life, began to unravel for real now. The man raised to never show weakness, to never break, was being peeled apart layer by layer. You're mistaking heritage for tyranny. Bill, he said, the words tight and measured but no longer untouched by emotion. William, Ma began, his tone pushing boundaries. But William's voice came low and firm, warning him to tread carefully. The monarchy today is nothing like what you're describing. Ma didn't back down, isn't it? Because honestly, it looks to me like the only real change is the branding team. A heavy silence followed. It lasted just a few seconds, but felt much longer. William's eyes narrowed, his expression hardening as he absorbed the jab. When he finally responded, his voice had shifted low, dangerous, the kind of tone only those closest to the palace would recognize. You know why I came here tonight? I believed we could have a meaningful conversation, talk openly, tackle real issues, find real solutions for both our countries. But instead, you're tossing out recycled Republican talking points like it's some college debate. Ma's eyebrows lifted, clearly pleased that he'd struck a nerve. Oh, now I'm the uneducated one? That's rich, especially coming from someone whose entire schooling was funded by people who never had a choice in the matter. William's voice rose slightly, just enough to make the tension noticeable in the room. It was the first real crack in his otherwise polished calm. I studied at the same schools as thousands of others. I earned my degree like they did. And I spent 7 years serving in the military. What about you, Bill? What have you done for your country? Besides sitting comfortably behind a desk, throwing stones at people who are actually trying to create change? The audience shifted, murmuring. This wasn't the polite, polished dialogue they expected from a royal appearance. The room felt electric, like something was about to snap. Ma leaned back in his chair, grinning now. There he is, the real Prince William. Not the polished public figure, but the privileged aristocrat who thinks his birthright shouldn't be questioned? Privileged? William shot back, his voice now cutting and bare of diplomacy. You really want to talk about privilege? Your whole career is built on cynicism, criticizing people who carry real responsibility. You've, never made choices that affect an entire nation. You've never had to walk the line between tradition and progress. You've never had to weigh your words for their long-term consequences. All you care about is your next TV rating. At least I earned my voice, Ma snapped. I didn't inherit it because one of my ancestors grabbed land centuries ago. William, suddenly stood, his chair scraping loudly across the studio floor. The noise cut through the air, silencing the crowd completely. You really think this is about land grabs? You think the monarchy is just some outdated artifact that wandered into the 21st century? Ma leaned forward, still seated, but now clearly enjoying himself. Isn't it? Take away the costumes, the constitutional jargon, the polished PR machine, and what's left? A family living in palaces while people sleep on park benches. A family owning half the countryside while families can't make rent. A family claiming to serve while being waited on hand and foot. William's fists clenched. You don't understand service. You sit in a cushy studio, surrounded by staff whose job is to make you look smart and that gives you the right to lecture me about duty. It gives me the right to ask hard questions, Ma said, his voice like ice. Like why your family clings to wealth while preaching charity? Why you need 5 residences while ordinary people are crushed by the housing crisis? Why we're supposed to bow to you just because of your bloodline? Because, William shouted, his voice echoing across the studio, we've dedicated our lives to this country. We've given up privacy, normality, the right to make our own choices, all the things you take for granted. Because when terror strikes, when floods destroy homes, when the country is in crisis, we show up, not because we're ordered to. Because it's our duty. That last outburst stunned everyone, including William himself. For a brief moment, his public mask shattered, and the world watching saw the man behind the title. You could feel the frustration simmering beneath the surface, the weight of duty, the bottled-up anger from years of public service and personal sacrifice. William had had enough. Ma saw his chance and didn't hesitate. Oh, so you're the victim now. Poor little rich boy stuck in castles with servants catering to your every whim. My heart absolutely bleeds for you. You don't get it, William replied, his voice softer now, but no less fierce. You think this is about wealth or privilege or influence? But when you're 5 years old and your mother dies and you're forced to walk behind her coffin, while the entire world watches, that's not privilege. When you can't hug your children in a moment of crisis because the entire nation needs you to stay strong, that's not power. When every mistake you make, every slip of humanity is turned into a headline that shakes the very institutions people rely on, that's not fortune. The room fell into complete silence. Even Ma was briefly thrown by the raw honesty, though he quickly regained his footing, instinctively slipping back into his role as provocateur. So now we're meant to pity you because your childhood was hard? Here's a newsflash. Your Highness, plenty of people have tough childhoods. The only difference is they don't get handed a throne because of it. William's cheeks flushed with anger. You're right, plenty of people have hard upbringings. But most of them don't have to grieve in front of flashing cameras. They don't have their pain turned into public theater. They're allowed to recover privately, not forced to put their healing on display for strangers. And most of them, Ma shot back, don't walk away from that pain with $100 million benefits. They don't get palaces and endless taxpayer-funded perks, while the average person works themselves to the bone and spends pennies on clothes your family blows thousands on. William stepped in closer, lowering his voice to a chilling whisper. Do you know what that money really pays for, Bill? It pays for a life without privacy. It pays for the silencing of our opinions. It compensates us for living every moment under scrutiny, every relationship, every cause, every word picked apart by people like you who've never carried true responsibility. Responsibility? Ma laughed again, though this time the edge was colder. You mean cutting ribbons, attending fundraisers, shaking hands, and reading speeches written by others? That's not responsibility, that's performance. Performance? William snapped, voice sharp. When I flew search and rescue missions, pulling survivors from the ocean, was that a performance? When I spent weeks in homeless shelters, not for photo ops, but to offer real dignity and time, was that just theater? When I work with wounded veterans or hold hands with parents who've lost their children to suicide, or use my platform to talk about issues politicians won't touch because they aren't popular, do you really see all of that as just an act? His voice trembled with passion, but Ma wasn't swayed. I'm sure all of that is very admirable. But at the end of the day, you go back to your palace. Those people go back to government flats. You get to feel good about how much you care. They still have to live with the pain. That was the breaking point. William's restraint cracked wide open. You pompous, self-righteous hypocrite, you think you're brave? Some truth-spewing hero of the people? You're nothing but a court jester who's forgotten he's there for entertainment. His words struck the air like a physical blow. A collective gasp rose from the audience. Even Ma seemed stunned, visibly rocked by the sheer intensity behind the prince's outburst. And then, for what felt like forever, the studio fell into a shocked, echoing silence. That line, "court jester, who's forgotten his place," hung in the air like the shockwave of an explosion. Ma's face shifted through a storm of emotions, first surprise, then disbelief, and finally something far more dangerous. "Court jester?" Ma's voice came out in a low, simmering tone, more threatening than if he had yelled. "Did you just call me that? Did the future King of England just try to put me in my place like I'm some lowly peasant who dared to speak out of turn?" William knew right away he'd crossed a boundary, but his anger was too raw, too deep to walk it back now. "If the title fits, Bill, you've built a career making fun of what you don't understand. Tearing down things you've never tried to build. Judging people who actually serve and sacrifice all for the sake of a laugh." Mar slowly stood up, his expression burning with rage to match William's. "There it is, modern royalty exposed. Scratch beneath all the public servant talk, all the speeches about duty and humility, and you'll find the same old entitlement, the same pride that's oppressed regular people for centuries." "Don't you dare accuse me of arrogance," William shot back, jabbing a finger at him. "You've spent this entire interview trying to embarrass me, twisting my words, mocking every sacrifice my family has made, turning our life of service into some kind of joke, and you want to talk about arrogance? Your life of service?" Mar's voice was ice-cold and sharp. "Let me paint you a picture of real service, Your Highness. It's a mother juggling 3 jobs to feed her kids, and still making time to help at the local food bank. It's a teacher who spends their own paycheck on supplies because the system doesn't care. It's a nurse pulling double shifts during a pandemic while people like you deliver speeches from the safety of a palace." William's face turned crimson. "And what would you know about any of that, huh? When's the last time you actually volunteered at a food bank, Bill? When did you ever do something for someone without thinking about your career first? You sit here judging me while your entire life is built on mocking experiences you've never had." "At least I don't pretend to be something I'm not," Mar snapped. "I'm a comedian, a commentator, a guy with a show who jokes about the news. I don't act like I was chosen by God to rule anyone. I don't ask for bows and curtsies. I don't lecture taxpayers while living off their money." "Chosen by God?" William gave a bitter, humorless laugh. "You really don't get it. You think this is about believing we're better than everyone else. It's not. It's about responsibility. It's about being born into a role you never asked for and spending your entire life trying to live up to it." "Live up to it?" Mar's voice rose in volume and heat. "What exactly makes you worthy of being a head of state? What have you done that an ordinary person couldn't do better? What's your big qualification being born into the right bloodline?" William stepped in closer, lowering his voice like a storm about to break. "You want to know what makes me worthy? I've spent 3 decades learning to put the people first. I've studied constitutional law, diplomacy, global economics, and history, everything I need to lead in the modern world. I've served in uniform. I've worked with charities. I've traveled across the Commonwealth listening to the people I may one day serve. What about you, Bill? What have you done besides crack jokes?" "I've spoken the truth," Mar said plainly, but the depth in his tone gave those words undeniable weight. "My entire career has been about exposing hypocrisy, standing up to power, and refusing to let those in authority shield themselves behind ceremony and tradition, especially when they're failing the very people they claim to serve. And now, standing here, hearing you defend your inherited privilege by invoking duty and sacrifice, I'm doing exactly what I've always done. I'm revealing the truth about who you really are. And who am I? William's voice dropped. Low, calm on the surface, but every person in the studio could feel the storm of fury rising underneath. Go on, tell me. What am I, really? Maher didn't flinch. He looked straight at William, voice unshaken. You're a relic. A living emblem of everything that's broken in the belief that some people are born superior. You've spent your life being told you're special, important, destined for greatness, and you've bought into it so completely, you can't even recognize how offensive that is to everyone who never had your privileges. The words landed like punches. William's hands trembled, his carefully guarded composure slipping. You arrogant, self-righteous little man. You think you're some fearless voice for democracy, a champion of the people, but you're nothing more than a parasite. You feed off the successes, the failures, the pain of others. You don't create. You don't build. All you contribute is bitterness and division. Maher didn't hesitate. Better a parasite who knows what he is than one who pretends to be a god, he snapped. At least I don't ask people to bankroll my life while pretending it's all for their benefit. That was the breaking point. William's control shattered. Do you even understand what I've given up? He spat. Every single day since I was a child, I've been preparing to serve my country, my people. I've sacrificed my privacy, my freedom, my ability to speak freely or live as I choose. I've dedicated my life to causes that matter, to helping others, to trying however I can to make the world a little better. And you sit there and have the audacity to tell me it's meaningless, just because I didn't earn it the way you think I should have? Maher's tone was calm but firm, burning with quiet conviction. Yes, he said. Because in a true democracy, in a society that values justice, service is something you choose, not something you inherit. Leadership is something earned, not handed to you through bloodlines. Until you understand that, until you're willing to end this absurd performance and let the people decide who should lead, you'll never be anything more than a symbol of what's wrong with the world. William stood motionless, his breath heavy with restrained anger. When he finally responded, his voice was soft but laced with venom. You're right about one thing, Bill. We are different. I've spent my life trying to build something better. You've spent yours tearing everything down. I've tried to serve a cause bigger than myself. You've only ever served your own ego. When history looks back on this moment, I believe it will be obvious which of us truly made a positive impact on the world. With those parting words, William turned and walked out. His exit was just as composed and regal as his entrance, even though he was leaving behind a storm of emotion. Ma watched him leave, the fire of his own anger still burning in his eyes. Ladies and gentlemen, Ma said, addressing the camera as the studio door shut behind the prince, Prince William, the future King of England. I think we've just seen the true man behind the crown. The audience remained silent, stunned, as the credits began to roll. Everyone sat there, trying to make sense of what they had just witnessed. This had been more than a fiery exchange. It was a head-on clash between two different worlds, two opposing beliefs about leadership, duty, and integrity. And neither side came out of it untouched. What's your take on this dramatic confrontation? Was Ma justified in challenging the very idea of monarchy, or did he go too far by targeting William's character and record? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more revealing moments that show who public figures really are when the spotlight's on and the pressure is real.